Having come to Israel and aliyah about 15 years ago, I was taken with the idea of the Jewish state. I was a true, and am a true Zionist who was swept with the idea of building up a national home in our ancient homeland, of the modern state being a direct continuation of the biblical kingdom, having a Jewish public culture, reinstating the mitzvot that are only dependent upon living in the land of Israel, mitzvot liot ba'aretz, and of course, wanting to contribute to society and wanting to contribute to peace. And of course, like every new immigrant, I was drafted into the army and went to serve. And I remember in one of my conversations with our officers in discussing, of course, the conflict and why we needed a strong army, I was not so politely reminded that we can only approach peace from the position of strength. Actually, not such a crazy concept, of course, that you don't make peace with your neighbors, you only make peace with your enemies, after you're no longer vulnerable, after your existence is no longer threatened. And I asked the question, I said, okay, well today, everything I've learned from going through basic training and seeing the army, it seems like we're in a pretty secure and strong place. So how come we don't have peace? Well, there are a number of explanations, and of course the peace process and the negotiation process is quite complicated. And looking at it now, 50 years after that fateful war in 1967, where our borders tripled and everything was rationed as a result of the need to maintain our security. And I began to explore some of the concepts of security in our Jewish texts. And of course, I'm reminded of a very famous passage in the book of Vayikra in Leviticus chapter 26, verses 5 through 6, that we read on Parshat Bechukotai. And it says, "V'hisig lechem daish et batzir, ubatzir yasig et zera, v'achatem lachmechem lishvoa, v'eshavtem levetach ba'artzechem." That your threshing shall overtake the vintage, and your vintage shall overtake the sowing, and you shall eat your fill of bread and dwell securely in the land. Fascinatingly enough, the next verse, this very next pasuk, goes on to say, "V'natati shalom ba'aretz u'shchavtem ve'en macharid, v'yishavti chaya ra'a min ha'aretz, v'cherev lo ta'avor ba'artzechem." That I will grant peace in the land, and you shall lie down untroubled by anyone. I will give the land respite from vicious beasts, and no sword shall cross your land. So the first notion of security is that we shall eat and have our fill. As long as we have enough to provide for ourselves, for our families, the whole question of what does that mean to your fill? How much do we actually need? Right? Do we need to, can we be samech b'chalkenu? Can we be satisfied with our lot and not to be greedy, not to take more than we actually need? Is a wonderful philosophical and quite practical question, actually. And what's the next connection between being secure in our land and then granting peace? So only when we think we have enough are we going to be able to have peace. However, the text then goes and tells us that we're meant to have a year of Shemitah. We're meant to have a year where we cease all production of food. That we'll have in the sixth year, we'll have an extra production or an extra harvest of produce that will keep us lasting for the next 3 years, essentially. A year of the Shemitah, where our land lies fallow, and another 2 years until we're able to start reaping and gleaning of our harvest once again. Essentially, what I understand this to mean is that true security lies in the commandment to be vulnerable. It's as if to say, lay down your arms for an entire extended period of time, and that will demonstrate your sense of security. Wow. What a concept. I thought the whole idea of Zionism was that we were meant to be We were no longer meant to be vulnerable, that we were able to defend ourselves and we were able to hold up our guard, and that we could rest assured that to be strong and to be able to defend ourselves meant that we would have lasting security. And I understand the text to take exactly the opposite, that in order to feel secure, we, in a sense, need to be so secure that we can be vulnerable, that we can stop providing for ourselves, that we can let our guard down for a short time. Now, two fascinating commentaries on this portion are here for us. One is the sense of security given to us by the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish, of course, Rav Avram Yishai Karlitz, one of the early leading Haredi figures, one of the leaders of the ultra-Orthodox community from the beginning of the State of Israel, says essentially the following. He says, "V'achen midat habitachon kinyan halev," that the quality of security is an acquisition of the heart, and the truly secure person by nature acts modestly. The ability to feel secure is to say, listen, I'm willing to give up something to the other. He goes on to say that only through their actions do we know that their security and courage in the Blessed One, in God. That, for instance, a shop owner would not be upset if another person opened a store, but would try hard to help them. Right? So we are not threatened by, let's say, a neighboring state, or we shouldn't be threatened by the Palestinians wanting to have their own state. We should see that as a way to enhance our own security. Of course, we don't have the luxury to be naive. But we have to understand that by building up the other, we are, in a sense, worrying about our own security and taking care of our own security. Another commentary on this parasha comes from the Sifra on Parashat Bechukotai, where it says, "Shema tamru harei ma'achal v'harei mishteh im ein shalom ein klum." That lest you say that here is food and here is drink, but without peace there is nothing. Ein shalom, ein klum. That we're able to say that it's so wonderful that we're provided for. It's so wonderful that we have even a plentiful resources to last us throughout this vulnerable period. It's so wonderful to say that we have enough to eat and enough to drink and enough to feed our families and enough to provide for our nation. By the way, halavai that were true. I wish that were in fact the case, and we understand that there is a significant poverty level in Israel. The Sifra goes on to say that if we don't have peace, none of that matters. Ein klum. Ein klum. I think that now we've proven what is necessary and what is unnecessary. What we're able to maintain, and the fact of the matter is, the question that I've been asking is, does our security, does our ability לשבת לבטח בארצנו, to reside securely in our land, or in other words, לחיות עם חופשי בארצנו, to be a free people in our land, must that come at the expense of the other? Right? Must that come at the expense of our neighbor, of the disadvantaged, of, in fact, the powerless? Right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be among those who are still living under military rule. Right? But the fact of the matter is that there is a population, millions of people, still living under military rule 50 years later, a situation that was meant to be temporary, which is looking to be no longer temporary. The great fear is that if this military rule, this occupation is ended, that we will be once again at the risk of great vulnerability. I understand that. I've stood on guard duty. I've seen the conflict up close. Right? And I want to leave us with the thought, coming from my own experience really, that being strong, having security, is really dependent on how others feel secure around us.